Now, I've always been more of a fan of the Mortal Kombat games as opposed to the Street Fighter ones.
Well, I am the complete freaking opposite. Hello guys, this is the Perpetuating Party of Patriots, and I've decided to, I guess, make another discussion video on this channel. Although this time, it's going to be more based on, well, gaming, more so fighting games. Now, you guys probably all know of both Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. And a while ago, I was watching Watch Mojo's video based on Street Fighter versus Mortal Kombat. I don't really like Watch Mojo that much, but I don't know, sometimes I'll watch their videos, but I see a lot of people in the comments section all pretty much voting on Mortal Kombat being better. And I completely disagree, well, mostly disagree with that sentiment, or disagree with that opinion. And today, I'm going to talk about the things that I think, why I think Street Fighter is better than Mortal Kombat, or more so, things I think Street Fighter does better than Mortal Kombat. But anyway, let's jump on to the first opinion. Number 1, the gameplay. Figured we might as well start off with the big one, and then we'll, I guess, increasingly go down as the video goes on. But anyway, one of the things that I'm not the hugest fan of in Mortal Kombat, or maybe this is probably just me, but for the most part, Mortal Kombat doesn't really feel all that smooth to play, or that, I guess, satisfying to play. Yeah, it is kind of fun with friends, and also kind of fun to play, but honestly, I don't know why, but the game feels, for the most part, the games do feel kind of clunky in certain areas. Not like horrible or anything, but honestly, it doesn't really feel all that smooth, and honestly, it's just really, let's just say, kind of unfair in terms of the difficulty, at least on the arcade mode, because I think for some reason, on like the third or so match, the computer will just completely smoke your ass, even on the easy settings. Now, Street Fighter, on the other hand, well, with pretty much with the exception of the first one, is incredibly smooth to play, in my opinion. But combos, while not insanely complex, well, at least not until either Street Fighter 3 or Alpha 3, are pretty fun to pull off. And also, while the special moves can be a bit easy to spam, kind of like Mortal Kombat, I still think it's fun to play most of the Street Fighter games. And also, while the arcade mode isn't incredibly difficult, it's not necessarily a cakewalk either. So it's at least a fair balance, unlike Mortal Kombat. Now, I know I don't usually talk about balancing on this channel, and while I don't necessarily think balancing is the most important thing in a fighter, I think it can get incredibly fucking frustrating when you're pretty much on the first or second or third match and it's pretty much near impossible. But yeah, like I said, I do think the gameplay in Street Fighter is a bit better than or actually a lot better in my opinion than the gameplay in Mortal Kombat. Now let's move on to the next one. Number 2, the music. Okay, one of the things I've personally literally never really gotten is, why do so many people think Mortal Kombat has the better music than Street Fighter? I mean, if you do hold that opinion, I do respect it, and it is okay if you have it, but I can't really remember many Mortal Kombat tracks on the top of my head. I think the Portal has a pretty good music. Living Forest is pretty memorable too. Deadpool had a kind of cool track, but that's about it actually. But Street Fighter, oh Jesus, that Street Fighter has a lot of memorable music in my opinion. I can name a lot of themes that I like right off the top of my head. Ryu's theme, Ken's theme, Guile's theme, Zangief's theme, Vega's theme, Balrod's theme, Sagat's theme, M. Bison's theme. I don't know if I mentioned him, but yeah, there's also stuff like Eagle's theme in the first Street Fighter, at least on the TurboGrafx 16 version. The original arcade version is kind of cool too, but personally I think the CD version sounds a lot more smoother. There's also Adon's theme in the Alpha series, especially Adon's theme. That's fucking kick-ass as shit. I think I mentioned Giles' theme, but I recommend listening to the CPS2 and SNES versions on the original SNES versions. Those sound so fucking good, in my opinion. I also think Dulcim had a pretty cool theme. Cammy, especially Phelan, especially on the SNES version of Super Street Fighter 2. That's extremely good. Yeah, there's a lot of themes I can actually name off the top of my head and remember from Street Fighter. Because I just think the music in that game is so fucking good, in my opinion. I'm not saying the Mortal Kombat soundtrack is necessarily bad, or the soundtrack for their games is necessarily bad, but there's not a whole lot I can remember off the top of my head. As to why I don't really get why there are a lot of people who think MJ has better music. But that's probably just me. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. Number 3, consistency. Now, I do believe I have said this on my channel before, but I'll say it again. I really do value consistency when it comes to franchises that I like. Well, it's not the main thing that I look for. It is kind of a bit of a factor, in my opinion. Mortal Kombat, it's not necessarily, I guess, the greatest in terms of consistency. The first game was alright, at least in my opinion. I know it's seen as a classic, but personally I don't really think it's all that great, at least nowadays. Mortal Kombat 2, it is a fun game, but it's one of the big examples of where the difficulty on the arcade mode is absolute horseshit. And Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, or Mortal Kombat 3 more specifically, it's good too, but it does have that difficulty problem. Mortal Kombat 4, haven't really played it. Deadly Alliance, well, pretty much all the 3D Mortal Kombat games, they're not necessarily technically that great, but they are fairly fun. Although the difficulty, well, yeah, the difficulty isn't that bad on them, but I don't know. I guess I guess the thing with Mortal Kombat is a lot of them are good, but the thing is, I don't really think most of them are that great. Street Fighter, on the other hand, oh boy, there's a lot of really good ones. Pretty much all the versions of Street Fighter 2, except maybe the Tiger and Game Boy versions. Well, mainly the Game Boy, because I haven't really played the Tiger versions, but Tiger games aren't really that great. But yeah, there's also the Street Fighter Alpha series, all 3 of them. There's also surprisingly Hyper Street Fighter Alpha, which I don't think many of you have heard of. It's basically Hyper Street Fighter 2, but applied to Alpha, which is really cool in my opinion. Pretty much all the versions of Street Fighter 3, especially Third Strike. Third Strike's fucking fantastic and fucking phenomenal. It's a really great game. Street Fighter 4, I know some people aren't really huge on that one. I thought it was a really good game. And I haven't really played Street Fighter 5, but yeah, I've heard kind of mixed thoughts on it. There are people saying it's great, but there's also a lot of people saying that it's the worst thing in existence, which I doubt. But yeah, there's also the spin-offs like Capcom vs. SNK. Those 2 games are pretty fun. Marvel vs. Capcom, all 3 of them. Well, I have played Infinite a bit, but yeah, Mortal Kombat, I meant Marvel vs. Capcom is a fun series. And yeah, there's also there's chibi versions like Pocket Fighter and Puzzle Fighter. Those are fun ones. Now, I don't really think there are any bad Street Fighter games except for Street Fighter 1. I thought that game was absolute horseshit. Probably worse than any Mortal Kombat game in my opinion. But yeah, I think Street Fighter has a lot more highlights in their franchise than Mortal Kombat. Again, Mortal Kombat isn't necessarily a bad series, as I have said. I do really like it. But I don't know, it's just, I think the fact that I don't really think many of them are necessarily that great. Well, I have played Mortal Kombat 11 recently, and it's actually a really fun one, but again, I haven't played it much, so I can't really make my own judgment on it fully, but yeah, what I'm really saying is, I think Street Fighter is more consistent with its quality. Yeah, this is a pretty long segment, but yeah, let's move on to probably the final one. Okay, probably should have thought of that with this, but yeah, I only really was able to come up with 3 reasons why I think Street Fighter is better than Mortal Kombat, or that's all I really have to say about why I think Street Fighter is better than Mortal Kombat. But anyway, guys, I am the Perpetuating Party of Patriots, and see you guys in the next video.